Hello and welcome. You're watching Head to Head. I'm Antonina Antosha with UATV. The 16th Yalta European Strategy Annual Meeting was held in Kyiv. This year's theme was Happiness Now, New Approaches for a World in Crisis. Over 400 leading politicians, diplomats, businessmen, civil activists and experts from 26 countries took part in the conference. The forum focused on governance for happiness and analyzed today's main global challenges. At the same time, the conference gave a comprehensive insight into Ukraine after the presidential and parliamentary elections. To talk more about this, we welcome to our studio today Inna Borzylo. She's the Chief Executive Officer of Center UA NGO. Hello and thank you for joining us.
Hello.
So first of all, let's talk about the first day and the opening of the forum. As it was opened by the YES founder Viktor Pinchuk and recently released from Russian captivity Ukrainian political prisoner Oleg Sentsov. And the speech by Oleg Sentsov, in which he called on Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky
to release more and more hostages.
To release more and more hostages and do whatever it takes in order to achieve this result. As a result, this speech was claimed to be one of the most powerful speeches. Why was the appearance of Oleg Sentsov so important during this first day of the forum?
Well, indeed, it was one of the most sincere and probably emotionally strong moment of the whole conference, and it was not obvious for participants that their hidden guest or a special guest for opening will be Oleg Sentsov. And by the way, the president, Mr. Zelensky, he asked Mr. Sentsov to open the conference instead of him. So it was also the gesture of showing the respect of the whole audience to Mr. Oleg Sentsov. And it was very important because not only Ukrainians and not only Ukrainian diplomats were fighting for the freedom of Ukrainian hostages, but also numerous leaders of European countries and international partners who were presenting and taking part actually in this conference.
Would it be fair to claim that Oleg Sentsov is currently the symbol of the Ukrainian nation after being released and brought back to Ukraine?
Well, news nowadays live a very short life, so I hope that indeed, thanks to the attention of media and thanks to the active position of Oleg Sentsov and other used to be hostages, ex-hostages of Kremlin, the topic of Ukraine, the topic of military conflict and the political prisoners, by the way, not only Ukrainian, but also Russian political prisoners in Russian, as Ukrainian prisoners stressed on it, will be on topic, will be in the agenda of high-level discussions and media attention as well. So I would say that Oleg Sentsov and other Ukrainian sailors and Ukrainian from Crimea who were released, they are indeed the symbol of a will, a dignity, and a patriotic position, and they have this dignity during the whole years of very bad conditions, being imprisoned in all over Russian Federation, and they are still very sure that Ukraine is a totally different country comparing to Russia, and it gives us the hope for another bright future.
Well, the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, had a more precise vision on or about how to bring back the rest of the political prisoners held captive in Russia. He said, and I quote here, "We must end the war and return our territories. The only way to do this is through diplomacy. I do not get tired of repeating to all our world partners who help us, but sometimes they think about lifting the sanctions." And there he asked a couple of questions. Are you losing money? Seriously? Sorry, but we're losing people. Do you agree that sanctions are a powerful enough tool to suppress Russia in its aggression?
Fortunately, I'm not the expert in security or in war conflict, but I guess it's more efficient to have them than not to have them. And Russia did nothing.
Agreed.
Russia did nothing to show their intentions to stop the influence on separatists or military aggression in the east, direct one, or to give away Crimea, yes, to Ukraine. So Russia doesn't demonstrate any change in its behavior. So why should be sanctions taken away?
Right. Also, while giving his speech, Volodymyr Zelensky announced the next stage of negotiations on further exchange of political prisoners. He also said that he will be announcing a plan on releasing currently temporarily occupied territories in Donbass. Do you think that those messages were convincing enough for the world leaders who are supporting Ukraine in the situation that we ended up in?
Well, security and the continuation of the negotiation process in a Normandy format or in all other formats possible one. It was, of course, the topic of a panel discussion and both the discussion outside the presentation hall. And what I heard and what I can say that the general mood was quite positive because finally the president, according to numerous impressions of foreign guests, demonstrated the political will to deliver the negotiations and, of course, like a newly elected government in Ukraine and new president of Ukraine, this is a good chance to start the negotiation or the dialogue with our enemy from the very scratch in the interests of Ukrainian society.
The Prime Minister, Mr. Honcharuk, also announced that the next week the Parliament is going to hear the plans on the new reforms or the course of the already being implemented reforms. He also claimed that a lot of people are not going to like the changes that are going to be presented to them. And I also have a quote here, him saying, "We understand that some of the changes will be unpopular, but these transformational changes will be needed to make the reforms happen." Also, Honcharuk claimed that within the next 5 years, the president and his team plan to enrich or enlarge the Ukrainian economy by 40%.
Yeah, it was announced.
How realistic is that from your standpoint?
Again, first of all, we should to see actually the presented program and vision of the government within some KPIs, with some budget needs and so on, to understand how professional these plans are or what other assistance from the civil society, from think tanks, from international partners, Ukrainian government will need to have enough of capacity to deliver this promise. But Prime Minister Honcharuk seemed to be quite technocratic. In his promises, he announced like a few main statements which we will hope to see in the detailed program. Among them is indeed the economical increase for 40% during the next 5 years. Also the land market, which is a very important topic. Liberalization of employment. Of course, healthcare, education, and environmental policy were announced as the future priority of the government.
Well, speaking of analysis, according to the worldwide study of happiness and political preferences, which was conducted by Yalta European Strategy in 15 countries around the world, 80% of Ukrainians believe that future generations will be happier than them. 65% are sure that life in the country will improve within the next 5 years. And experts attribute this to recent elections in which the new government received an unprecedented mandate.
Pathological optimists we are.
Is this what the numbers tell us?
It is, because according to the entering words of Mr. Pinchuk, the host of this Yalta European Strategy Conference, comparing to other countries in the world, Ukraine is the most optimistic about its future. Maybe because of our very special situation in Ukraine, maybe because, of course, the post-Soviet past and Soviet past. And I think that on this wave of belief and desire to see some new faces, new rules, new approach of politicians, Ukrainians voted for a completely new government. So now it's a historical moment for Mr. Zelensky and his team, majority in the parliament, government formed by them, to deliver and to prove by actions that they will really take into the main position the interests of society, Ukrainians, but not the interests of some certain business groups.
My question is, does President Zelensky and his team understand the burden of the responsibility they are carrying right now?
I want to believe they do. I want to believe they do, because indeed we are not talking only about the new faces. We are talking now about new generation which came to rule.
Right.
And what we expect, and what foreign guests of the conference like publicly announced, that they also expect for a new approach, new ideas, new priorities, a new way of policy making in Ukraine. And I guess it was the Speaker of the Parliament, of Ukrainian Parliament, who during one of the panels, Mr. Razumkov said that it's the first chance for their team, the Mr. Zelensky team, but it may be the last chance for Ukraine to change. And with this statement, I hope they do understand their personal reputational risks, of course, and the future of Ukraine, which is now in their hand.
How would you evaluate the phrase by Volodymyr Zelensky where he said that we can't afford making mistakes if we have quick results?
Well, it was again, there was a second phrase that if we make some mistakes, we are ready to work on our mistakes. And they now have the majority of power in the parliament, in the government, to make quick changes. As a representative of civil society, I would rather see no mistakes. I would rather them be open and engage think tanks, a lot of analytical centers with their capacity to help to make policies proposed by government more qualified, more high quality. And again, the representatives of government, they assured that they are open for such cooperation. But the speed of this legislative process is something brand new for Ukrainian politics. And I guess nobody yet understands especially from the government and especially from the parliament, what could be the consequences of this speed. Sometimes the mistakes and the price of these mistakes could be as big that it will change radically the intentions of this policy change at the beginning.
Right. Well, thank you so much for coming and clarifying the situation for us.
Thank you.
That was Inna Borzylo. She's the Chief Executive Officer of Center UA NGO. Thank you so much for watching UATV. Stay tuned for the rest.